Hi, thank you, and welcome to Noise Violation Podcast. We have a special guest today. He is the nationally syndicated host of the Ken Coleman Show, the #1 best-selling author of The Proximity Principle, the proven strategy that will lead you to the career you love. He is also the author of One Question, Life-Changing Answers from Today's Leading Voices. I'd like everyone to welcome Ken Coleman to the show. Ken, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Yeah, so I know it's a brief time frame that we got here, so if we want to just keep our answers are just abbreviated and we can get through a lot here, but give everyone a little taste about what it took you to get to where you're at today, to be the host of the Ken Coleman Show and, on the Dave Ramsey Network, and touching all the people that you do. How did you get to where you're at? Where are you from? Kind of start from the beginning.
Well, it's a really, really long story. So to keep the answer brief, I'm going to have to cut all of that out. And I would say that
just the exciting parts.
Yeah, the answer is I started out doing the small stuff, doing the really, really small stuff. And I can't tell you how many times I did some type of a broadcast where very few people were listening, probably a handful, if that. And it was those experiences that really clarified what it was going to take, how hard the work it was going to be, how humble it was going to be, how lonely it was going to be. And then it verified that I still wanted to do it, because every time I did it, anytime that I knew a microphone was on, my heart sang. And I think that what I would want people to hear from this is what it takes is doing the small stuff and continually doing the small stuff and continually doing the small stuff and continually doing the small stuff. And then a medium opportunity comes and you might still have to do some small stuff. And then you get some more medium opportunities. And then you start doing a lot of medium stuff. And so then you got to do a lot of medium stuff and then some more medium stuff. And you see where this is going.
Right.
So it takes a lot of time. And one of the challenges that we humans have is the tension that exists between persevering and having the patience necessary to persevere, and this idea of I'm going to have to get up and persist every day and then persevere through the tough times and persevere through the waiting. So there's a tension between getting up every day and getting after it and then having the patience to wait. Everybody says they're willing to do what it takes, but very few people are willing to wait as long as it takes. And I think that continues to stay with me even now. There are big things that I want to be happening, and they're not happening as fast as I want, but that's part of the journey. So that's what I would say.
What motivated you to do that small stuff?
Well, the big picture, the vision. Yeah, Jim Collins introduced a term to us in the book Good to Great, and he calls it a BHAG, and that is an acronym for Big, Hairy, Audacious Goal. And it's a fun way of basically saying a big 30-year, 40-year, 50-year vision. And I think when you have tremendous clarity on that, that's what motivates you. So motivation isn't some mysterious thing. You break the word down, it's motive. What's your motive, right? And so that's where motivation comes from. So my motive was so big and so clear that I was able to do the hard stuff and stay with it because of my clear vision.
Right. And being an interviewer back in the day, you probably started before really the podcasting and YouTube really set off. So was it like radios? How did you meet the people to?
Yeah. Well, I started my interview journey and interview career on a podcast, a leadership podcast for a successful leadership organization. And I went in there, had used to work full-time for the organization, was on my own in the early days of pursuing broadcasting. And I remember reading a Fast Company article about podcasting through basically putting a broadcast out and people listen to it on an iPod. So by the looks of you, I don't even know if you remember iPods. You're a young guy, but there was a thing before smartphones that was called an iPod. And so podcasting was really, really new, but I
Right.
understood it. It was just recording audio, and then you were going to distribute it via iTunes, essentially. And so I went to these guys who I knew because we worked together previously, and I said, listen, you guys are a national leadership organization. You need a podcast. And it's basically your own radio show that you just put out this way. And here's the deal. I'll host it for free because it's going to be a great experience for me. And I want to, take my interview skills because I'd only done a few interviews at that time. I want to take them to the next level. And they said, yeah, we're in. And so we got it started, and it became one of the top leadership podcasts. But this was 10, 12 years ago, before podcasting was really a thing. And so that's how I developed the chops. And so because that organization had a lot of credibility, I was able to get a lot of big names.
Yeah. What were some of the challenges that you faced when interviewing people? Was it coming up with questions or researching the?
Yeah, I just think
people?
I think two things come to mind. One, in the early days, was overcoming the doubt. I hadn't done a lot of interviews. I knew that I was pretty decent. The first interview I ever did was with Coach K, and he gave me high marks. So I had a sense that I was pretty decent, but I was still new to the art form of doing a good interview. And so I think a little bit of doubt, you had to overcome that, was a challenge. And then I think um, just putting in the right research and the right thought ahead of time to really learn how to craft and then execute a good interview. That was a challenge early on because it's brand new, so there's only one way to
Right.
figure it out. And that's the deal. It's like riding a bike. First couple of times you try to ride a bike, you're probably going to wreck it. But that's part of the deal.
Yeah. So what do you think are the keys to, 3 keys to a good interview?
Yeah. I love that question. 3 keys to a good interview. The first key is preparation. I think the biggest mistake that young interviewers make, or just people who aren't good interviewers, they don't do the preparation ahead of time. And so what happens is in the middle of the interview, they check out on their guest's answer right about the time they think they need to be ready for the next question. And so they're looking down and they're trying to get ready to, okay, how am I going to ask this? Or I got to look at this and remind myself what I'm about to ask. And so they're disengaged.
Right.
And when you're disengaged, you're not having an active conversation. And when you're not having an active conversation, you're going to miss some gold. So preparation is everything. Having the freedom to ad lib because you're prepared, so you know where you want to start and where you want to finish, and you know where you're going to be in between. That freedom that preparation gave me the freedom to ad lib because at any time I could rabbit trail and then get right back on what I felt was the best conversation. So preparation is the first key. The second key is to listen well, to really truly engage. Listen for the gold in the answer. Listen for an opportunity to do a follow-up question, to go deeper. You may have asked a question here. The guest gives you a question a little bit deeper, and then they open up a window for you to take the listener and your guest into a deeper hole. So listen really well. And then I think the third key, if you're in person, this doesn't matter as much if you're not, but if you're in person, use your body language to make your guest really, really comfortable, make them feel like you're super interested. You can really take an interview to the next level by showing full body engagement in the interview.
Yeah. So what do you think are the challenges for like a phone interview or a Skype interview like we're doing now is when I can't be there and,
when you can't see somebody, you don't have the advantage of seeing their face light up, and you don't have the advantage of seeing them lean into you and smile. So as the interviewer in that situation, you need to use words and enthusiasm with those words to communicate all that, and so really do a good job of engaging and saying, wow, that's really good. That's fantastic. That hit me right in the chest. You don't want to lean on that for every time they say something, or else it becomes very performed and very stilted. You don't want to do that, but there are ways you can do that. I think just generally being excited, and showing enthusiasm will do that over the phone.
Yeah, that's great. And I know a lot of what you do, you take in a lot of calls from people, so you don't get a lot of the verbal
Mhm.
or nonverbal communication cues. So um, I guess that's also kind of leading me into the next question about all these calls that you're taking is for a, give me a one word answer here. Um, what is the main thing that's keeping people from staying in their job to moving into what they want to do? Do they not
Fear.
have the finances? Do they not have the technology? You know, kind of a one word answer that's keeping them stuck, if you will.
Fear.
Fear.
Yeah. Do you want me
Mm-hmm.
to expound on that? You said one word answer, so I gave it to you in one word.
Yeah. And then
That's the biggest thing.
the follow up would be, how do they overcome that fear?
Well, there's three things you do to overcome fear, and I love that you use the word overcome because you can't eliminate fear. You cannot. Fear is always going to be there, lurking around a corner, wanting to hang out on your shoulder, and take up
Mm-hmm.
residence. But you can't overcome it. The first thing you do is you have to name it.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be very specific. And in naming your fear, it's actually best to write it down on a piece of paper and write it out. So it's not just, well, I'm afraid of rejection. No, I'm afraid of rejection because I'm afraid of this, this, this. Be very specific about the fear. So if it's fear of rejection or fear of financial failure or, fear of what others are going to say about you, write the fear out. This is what I'm afraid of, right? And you write
Right.
it out.
Mm-hmm.
What that does is it gets it out of your head and you get it on paper and it begins to look a little bit silly, if not completely silly at that point. So that's number one. Number two is
Mm-hmm.
now that you've written the fear out, now you've got to break the fear down. So deconstruct it. It's a lie. So it's almost like
Mm-hmm.
put fear on trial and find out all the different ways that you can prove that that statement that you just wrote out that you're terribly afraid of, write it down, look at it, and deconstruct it. Nope, that's not true. That's not going to happen. That's silly. That's ridiculous. The chances of that happening are slim to none. So we deconstruct it, and that leads to step three. Once we've deconstructed it, we've proven how it's a lie. Now we've freed our brain up to focus on the truth.
Mm-hmm.
So if this is what I've been thinking and this is a lie, then what's the truth? And because I've now made my fear look silly, I've proven in my own brain that my fear is completely wrong and lying. Now I'm going to switch my focus from the fear and I'm going to focus on the truth. And when we do that, our brain is a picture taker. We know from neuroscience that there's this thing in our brain called the reticular activating system. The way it
Mm-hmm.
works is whatever we focus on, our brain goes and takes pictures of that and supports it. So by switching your focus in step three, you're no longer focusing on the voice of fear. You're focusing on the voice of truth, and you begin to see things that you never saw before.
Yeah, I love that. Focus on the truth. Um, so I think in a lot of these decisions, we're thinking very, very emotionally. We're thinking with our passions, and we're thinking, um, you know, fear-based is an emotion. When do we start thinking logically? Because people always say, follow your passion, do what you love, follow your passion, but no one really says, follow the accounting statement, because the numbers have to make sense. You can't run a business if you're losing money every day. And so eventually I think sometimes the emotions can take you so far and drive you, but also people have to make decisions logically. And so where does that balance come into when you're talking
Well,
about?
I mean, in order to make a logical decision, you've got to be thinking clearly. So it really gets back to my last answer. You can't be logical when you are uh, focused on fear and doubt and pride. Those are really the three enemies of all of our progress. If you really break it down, it's fear and doubt and pride. So when
Mhm.
those enemies of the head and heart, they're really enemies of the heart, and they basically live in the head. Okay, and
Yeah.
they're drowning out the voice in our heart.
Hmm.
And so logic, we're incapable of using logic when we're clouded
Hmm.
by fear and doubt and pride. So it's really easy to be logical when you're healthy emotionally.
Yeah, I love that. And so from your book, One Question, what's one of the biggest lessons that you took away that can help people, whether it's one question that they can ask themselves and answer that has the biggest impact on their life?
Well, the whole book really illustrates what I think is the main lesson from that book, and that's the power of an intentional question. The reason I wrote One Question was because I wanted to prove to people that that a question, a well thought out question, an intentional question that gets to the heart of the matter and reveals what we really need to know is an unbelievable tool or weapon, whichever example you want to use there. And I wanted people to see that um, this idea of never losing your curiosity. We come into this world hardwired to ask questions. Toddlers ask somewhere between, I think, 800 to 1,000 questions a day. It's insane.
Wow.
And that's just, nobody tells a toddler to do that. Is the
Mm.
toddler trying to be obnoxious? Now, as a parent of 3, I've been through this stage. There were times where it's like, good grief, they keep saying, why, daddy, why? Well, they're not doing it to irritate you or to get your attention. Do you know what they're trying to do? Trying to get to the bottom of it. This
Just
whole
curious.
world is new to them. They've never seen a styrofoam cup before. That's fascinating. And so they want to know, why the styrofoam cup? How do they make it? Why do they make it? Why do we use this? Why don't we use that? And so what we know from the University of Michigan that we actually cited in this book, One Question, was that by the time Americans reach the 8th grade, they're actually asking about 3 to 4 questions a day. And that to me is
Oh
tremendous.
my God.
And that's a function of our education system beating the curiosity out of kids. Why? We don't teach kids to be critical or creative thinkers anymore in school. I don't
No.
want to hack anybody off, but I'm just gonna be honest. Our education system in the Western Hemisphere is based on memorizing and test taking.
Mm-hmm.
So we are unintentionally creating answer givers, not pathfinders.
So is there a
That's the
way,
problem.
is there a way to increase that curiosity, to ask better
Yeah.
questions?
Yeah. Number one, always be learning something and then asking more questions based on what you learn. So if you're reading a book, you ought to be coming up with about 5 to 6 questions that you want to get more answers to. If you're a parent, encourage your kids to always ask questions. Encourage them. What do you want to know? Before bedtime, let every kid have one question. Hey, you get to ask me about anything. You want to know where cows come from? You want to know, is the moon round? Why is it on light? Whatever. And parents, be okay with not knowing the answer. But you've got to encourage that insatiable curiosity because we're hardwired with it and it's indisputable. And when we put that antenna down in life, that's when adults get really, really sad and miserable. They just stop asking, what's here? What's here? Why am I not doing this? What's next? What's the best? Is the best yet to come? You want to keep that antenna up so that you're fully engaged.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear, Ken, and I want to appreciate you for your time and thank you and acknowledge you for all that you do for people and helping people really find their passion and giving useful advice and tips on how to do it and making their dreams become a reality. Last question is, where can people find you online? How can they find more of what you do and dive into the Ken Coleman world?
Yeah, kencoleman.com, great place to connect with us. We've got a ton of free resources for folks. We have articles all over the website. We've got all of the connections to us on social media. Folks can get the proximity principle in a bundle. So there's just all kinds of great information to connect with us there, kencoleman.com.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Ken.
Thanks for having me, bro. Appreciate it.